Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do this little video that I thought was very particularly interesting. And this video pretty much came right on time. And the reason why I say that is because, especially ever since the Andrew Ruiz Jr. versus Luis Ortiz fight, I have been commentating overall about what that fight meant to certain fan bases and what it meant to certain boxing channels out there other than my own overall. And what I meant by that is that you're going to see some of the fan bases or some of the people debate about who truly was the better fighter between the two, no matter who the winner was. If overall Mr. Andrew Ruiz was the victor, which he was, just like I predicted, you're going to have certain people overall, or you were going to have certain people, just as I predicted, state that, well, the only reason why Luis Ortiz lost that fight was because he was super old. And don't get it wrong, Luis Ortiz was 43 years of age. But at the end of the day, Luis Ortiz, in my view, he's just never been that great of a fighter. Well, as I stated, all in all, or at least he was a decent contender, not a great one. But anyways, when it comes down to it, just like I stated in those videos, the reason why that is because a lot of these channels, especially that of New Media and the LDBC, what their narratives are going to try to be is to make sure that Deontay Wilder is as best remembered as possible. And I already told you guys this within a multitude of videos as of recent. They not only want you to remember Mr. Deontay Wilder, who was a black American fighter and was a very, very decent fighter, during his day. And who knows, we don't know, how much more he's going to accomplish in his career. If I had to guess, I don't see him winning another title, but you never know. Something could happen, especially if both Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury do retire very, very soon, or after they have a unification fight. Who the hell knows? But anyways, when it comes down to it, the thing that Dante's Boxing Nation and Mr. Aki TV and a lot of these other channels are going to try to do is to make Deontay Wilder and make certain fighters look the best way as possible. And if they have to tear down other fighters in order to do that, they will do that. And Mr. Tyson Fury is one of those fighters. And that is the reason why they don't like Tyson Fury. You see, they liked Tyson Fury overall when they thought that he was just going to be a stepping stone for Mr. Deontay Wilder and basically in the war, in the battle of Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder. But once they figured out that Tyson Fury overall actually had a horse in this race to become the best heavyweight in the world when it came down to it, they immediately turned against him. And that's when these allegations popped up. That's when these allegations of egg weights in the gloves and, oh my God, did you see this or did you see that? He drugged Deontay Wilder, all sort of bullshit when it came down to it. None of these allegations came to the fray or came to the front work when it came down to it, or whatever you want to say, overall, or to the forefront, I should say, until Tyson Fury gave Deontay Wilder that ass whooping in the rematch. It just is what it is. And we've heard a certain amount of fans overall for many fighters give excuses to why they lost, but I don't think that I've ever heard quite a fan base overall give as many of a number of excuses for a fighter that ended up losing a fight as the Deontay Wilder fan base. It is quite phenomenally overall insane. But anyways, we're going to take a look at this video. We're going to see not only what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say, but what Mr. Deontay Wilder has to say himself. Let's get into it.
As you can see, there's no fucking padding in here, and all the padding's in the back of his fucking glove.
Now, of course, for those of you that don't know this incident, this was the Nicholas Asbury incident. Nicholas Asbury apparently was, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he was a former sparring partner of Mr. Tyson Fury, and apparently he alleged this at one point in time. Now, could this be something realistic? Could this have, be something that actually happened? Who knows? Maybe. It's possible. This would not be the first time that there's been a report of a lack of padding in the gloves or something like that. Of course, we know that that's how Antonio Margarito somewhat got caught. Well, actually, he ended up getting caught overall before a professional fight, I believe, overall by the coach that was training Sugar Shane Mosley at the time. I don't remember the dude's name. Unfortunately, slipping my mind at the moment. But overall, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it's also a little bit hard for me to believe because before these allegations were coming to surface, a lot of them really with no clear evidence whatsoever, I've never really heard anything fishy with Tyson Fury's gloves. I've never really heard anything fishy with them. And I have not really seen anything super fishy with them. So is this really an incident overall to where something, real is going on? Or is this something overall to where he did not like Tyson Fury, or there was an incident behind the scenes, or certain things in sparring occurred that he did not like and maybe he was trying to allege something? Who knows? But at the end of the day, I have to go with a certain amount of stack of evidence. And Tyson Fury, in my view, has never been caught red-handed overall with any fishy sort of gloves, especially in professional bouts. So it just is what it is.
Look at that shit. I could touch my other side of my finger with this shit. And there's shit falling out from the middle of the glove. Does he know who the fuck I am? He must not.
Nicholas Asbury, I assure you, nobody knows who the hell you are. The only reason why I know this dude's name is because of the Deontay Wilder allegations. That is the only reason why. But anyway.
No, does he? Does he? What? Oh, he does not know. Look at this shit, man. And then, hold on, these are the spawn gloves they told me they got for me. These thick ass, look at, hold on, let's see, watch the squeeze. Going nowhere. Going nowhere.
Many of you don't know about these $35 earbuds, but they are amazing. They're $35, but they have...
Watch this shit. Get the fuck out of here.
DontesBoxingNation, what's going on, guys? So Deontay Wilder did a recent interview where he was asked.
You know, I've already commented on this picture many, many times. Dante always tried to allege that that picture right there, as you see with the red circle, and you can see somewhat of a line in the middle. What Dante always tried to allege is that Mr. Tyson Fury put his hand lower into the glove. It's just such nonsense. You can tell that that overall is the palm of his hand. And the reason why you can tell that, if you know shit about boxing, which Dante obviously doesn't, shocker, because they don't wrap that part of the hand. If you're alleging overall that's where his knuckles are curling, they don't wrap overall the middle of your fingers. So what that would have to be is that would have to be the top of the palm. And they do leave some of the palm, depending on the way that they wrap it, they do leave some of the palm unwrapped, especially the bottom half, at least overall part of it. So I've already debunked this shit a long, long time ago. But it's just unfortunate how many people fall into this stuff. And that's a big part of the reason why I like to review so many videos from some of these channels. Because there's no offense. I'm not saying that they all have bad points 100% of the time. But a lot of the times, they're just so full of shit.
If he thinks he would ever have some type of friendly relationship with Tyson Fury, like a similar relationship that Deontay Wilder now has with King Kong Ortiz. And this is what Deontay Wilder said.
Nah, never. Because I know the truth behind it. I don't condone and cheating and shit like that. I know that no matter what people say, it's just like people use, you have analysts or whatever. If he did have something in the glove, or if he did something, why did you not go to the authorities? And I wish I was in front of them. I can grab their collar, and I would grab their collar and put them close to my face so we can be eye to eye, face to face, so much that my breath touched their face. And I would tell them, why the fuck would I go to the authorities when I have an opportunity to release my own energy and put my hands upon him in the possibility of trying to kill him and get paid millions of dollars doing it?
Deontay Wilder sounds like a person that is very, very decently upset. He sounds like a person that lost a court case or something. He sounds like an upset, single, drugged out mother that ended up losing her kids in a court battle. That's what he ends up sounding like doing. So basically what this dude just said, and I mentioned this a very, very long time ago, and one of the points overall that I mentioned was that if you overall were, believing that Tyson Fury actually cheated, why would you not take this to the authorities? Why would you not take it to court? Sure, overall, you can state all you want that, that I just want my revenge and all that shit. Right, but you're talking about your professional career. You're talking about overall having that loss on your record forever. If you truly believe that you had a case, not only could you get your belt back when it comes down to it, you could possibly get Tyson Fury suspended for the sport, a lifetime ban. You could potentially overall get him, to pay you millions of dollars. Overall, you could get that loss revoked. So why would you not go there? So Deontay states all this bullshit. He overall, got into the excuses overall at DontesBoxingNation, all this other bullshit. He let these guys get in his head when it came down to it, and he went along with the excuses. No, sir, I don't believe that shit. And I don't think all in all that you believe that shit either, but you have to put that out to the public overall because that's how you sleep at night. Anyway. It makes no goddamn sense how overall Deontay Wilder, he wouldn't take it to the authorities because everything overall, if he truly thought that he had a case, when it comes down to it, it would make 100% sense overall to take it to the authorities. But that's what this idiot overall has to make as a point, because when it comes down to it, if he still is going to allege that, that's really the only thing that in his mind would make sense. In my view, and for any of us that are logical, it don't really make that much sense. But there's no offense against Deontay, but he's not really the sharpest tool in the shed anyway. Anyway.
The authorities, they lock him up, then what's next? That's it. A good write-up. Okay, we proved our case. Nobody getting fed. What justice does that done? That don't make no sense.
I've already stated this a multitude of times in the fight. And maybe overall there was times where the gloves looked like this. I never seen it when it came down to it. Every time that I looked in the rematch with Deontay Wilder, I never once overall seen the gloves look like this. Never did. Just is what it is. And if you can provide me any pictures, and I'm talking about screenshots within the fight, I'm not talking about these pictures. If you can provide me any pictures, screenshots from the fight, because it should be clear enough yourself to where overall you can see any pictures like this, please let me know. Because I still to this day have never had one person overall bring me a picture from the fight themselves that was different than these set of pictures that these guys released, all in all. Overall, that where the gloves looked anything similar to like this. Anyway.
Sounds like somebody that don't.
And even overall, if they did, when it came down to, once again, there is certain lighting and angles overall that make gloves look like this. But once again, when I watched the fight, I never even seen the gloves look like this. But anyway.
That's not non-competitional. That don't supposed to be in no combat sport because their mindset ain't set on combat. It's set on being nice. Or that whole theory don't even make sense to me. Like,
of course it doesn't make sense to you because you don't have any sense, Deontay. There's no offense against you, but you're an idiot. It just is what it is. You're a very gifted athlete. You're not very gifted upstairs. It just is what it is. You are not the most thought-provoking dude. Is no offense.
How we do that when we are in the hurt business? This is what we do. I can hurt you and get paid doing it. That sounds like a sweet deal to me.
Right, and you could have got paid millions of dollars by taking Tyson Fury to court if you truly thought that you had a case. The truth was, all in all, is that you didn't think that you had shit, and that's the reason why you didn't bring it to court. So shut the fuck up, take your loss overall like a man, stop bitching overall when it comes down to it, and try to come back better. Listen, once again, I get it. Boxing especially is very, very prideful. But it's going to mean that much more to Deontay Wilder because Deontay Wilder knew what he stood for. Remember, Deontay Wilder to a lot of these guys, especially in America, he's the new Malcolm X. That's what he is. That's what he believes that he is when it comes down to it. So basically, Deontay Wilder is the new leader of the Black Panthers. That's what he is. So overall, once again, when he lost this fight, especially to a Caucasian man, it hurt his pride that much more badly. It was like when Ronda Rousey started losing fights when it came down to it. She got hurt so bad, not only all in all because she let herself down, but because she was the big, feminist overall go-to for that time when it came down to it. She was talking shit on everybody at the time. She was talking shit on Floyd Mayweather, Holly Holm, certain amount of other women UFC fighters when it came down to she was a big go-to. She overall was being used as a pawn when it came down to it. So when she lost, she didn't feel overall like she just let herself down. She knew that she let millions down across the world. All right, anyway.
Completely makes all the sense in the world. I mean, if you did something to some gangster, like a mob gangster, they're going to most likely want to get you before the police does. They're going to feel justice wasn't served if the police get you first before they do. He wanted to get his hands on
All right, but this ain't the streets. This isn't the damn streets. It just is what it is. This is professional boxing. Listen, there are fighters on the north that have come from worse places than Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder comes from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. All right, he doesn't come from, Detroit, Michigan. He don't come from Baltimore when it comes down to it. Now, that's not me saying that he did not have certain times to where all in all he had tough times. That's not me saying that. But listen, at the end of the day, if you truly thought that you had a case when it came down to it, you would have went to the authorities. So stop bullshitting. All right, and if Deontay Wilder truly thought that he had a case in that third match, and I've already mentioned this, when it came down to right before the third fight was about to come up, that is, Tyson Fury mentioned a very great point, and he said, well, if you truly believe that I cheated or if that, something happened with the gloves, then JD's would have to be at fault, and Deontay Wilder never had a response to that. So why the hell did you fire Mark Breland overall, who wasn't even the main one watching the gloves, but you won't fire JDs if you truly believe in that theory, that pretty much overall destroys that theory right there. Because it just doesn't make any damn sense.
Tyson Fury when he found out that Tyson Fury cheated. But the problem for Deontay Wilder is the damage was already done in that second fight when Tyson Fury was successful.
I already told you guys, and if you look at my videos from months past, I already told you guys the bullshit excuses of what they were going to make. Oh, the reason why Deontay Wilder lost that fight the way that he did was because he was never the same after Tyson Fury cheated in the second match. What are you talking about? You guys were saying that Tyson Fury, that he don't have no punching power. That he don't have no punching power. So even apparently overall with padding removed from the gloves when it comes down it, because we already know they didn't have an egg weight in there, how the hell did Tyson Fury have that much power? Because apparently overall he was not going to be allowed to cheat in the third fight when it comes down to it. Right? Apparently he was not going to be allowed to cheat. That's what you guys all said when it came down to it. He was not going to be allowed to cheat in the third fight. And then all in all, somehow the ass whooping was even worse than the first two. How does that happen?
At cheating, hitting Deontay Wilder repeatedly with this right glove that you guys are looking at right here in the images. Now you hear
right. Go ahead and take a look at the fight for me. Take a look at those pictures. Please send me a picture. Please send me a screenshot of when the gloves look anything like that in the fight. Now, who knows? Maybe this could be, certain angles with light. Boxing gloves overall, they can be made out of leather or other materials. So who knows? Overall, there may be certain maneuverability. Boxing gloves at times can have maneuverability. But once again, I never seen at any point in time, and I still to this day have never had one person send me a screenshot or send me pictures of when the gloves look anything like this during the fight. All right, not these pictures that they released. Because to be quite honest with you, I'm not really sure how authentic these photos are.
Deontay Wilder, he basically said the mentality of a fighter is to get it back in blood and make a whole lot of money in the process. But the reality is, if Deontay Wilder, let's reverse the roles, if Deontay Wilder was the one that was white and he was the victim of someone cheating, Wilder would have never got an opportunity to get it back in blood. Because if the cheater looked like Deontay Wilder, they would have banned this man from the sport of boxing damn near before he...
Right, but when it comes down to it, Mr. DontesBoxingNation, the problem is that Mr. Tyson Fury did not cheat Deontay Wilder. The only ones that cheated Deontay Wilder were him, the man himself, and stupid idiots like you providing him with excuses. You were never helping out Deontay Wilder. But you know what? There's a saying overall, everything ends up being the way that it's supposed to be in the end. Certain people overall are just excuse makers. Certain people do not learn very well from their mistakes. All right, Deontay Wilder is not a Canelo Alvarez. He's not a Floyd Mayweather Jr. He's not a Sugar Ray Leonard. He's not that guy. He's not a Muhammad Ali. He is not an all-time great fighter. He's a decently great fighter, but he's not an all-time great fighter. He does not have that boxing IQ.
He could even make it back to his dressing room after the fight. Worst case scenario is he would at least be suspended. We could clearly tell that Deontay Wilder we seen in the third fight was not the Wilder we seen before he fought.
It was the exact same Deontay Wilder. Dante, stop bullshitting. All right, stop giving these bullshit excuses. It was the same exact goddamn Deontay Wilder. All right, it was the same exact Deontay Wilder, and that's why he lost the fight.
Tyson Fury in the second fight. And listen, let me make this clear, because I have always said this. Deontay Wilder has never been known for his skill. In fact, if we're being honest and we were to compare Deontay Wilder's skill, we're only comparing all of the American champions right now. If we were to compare him to all the other American champions and even American prospects, Deontay Wilder, once again, when he was champion, comparing him to all the other black American champions, Wilder was probably the least skilled fighter out of all of them. But where Deontay...
Right, but yet at one point in time, you had him top 5 pound for pound. So obviously you believe that Deontay Wilder, someone had the goods. So stop bullshitting, Dante. This is a big part of the reason why it's so hard for me to respect a lot of this dude's commentary. This dude is so inconsistent with a lot of his commentary. This dude is so full of shit 99.9% of the time. Like, dude, come on. Like, it just is what it is.
Wilder lacked in skill.
And even if you were going to mention that, you can't necessarily compare a heavyweight overall. You know, like that's like me also mentioning George Foreman. Now, if we were going to bring up George Foreman overall was not an A-grade skilled heavyweight, at least when it came down to it. He was not someone overall that was a Muhammad Ali. That's why he didn't beat him. I don't even know if in terms of skill, if he was on the same level as Joe. But what George Foreman was known for overall, when I say Joe, I'm talking about Joe Frazier, of course. When we talk about, when it comes down to it, when we talk about Mr. George Foreman, the reason why he's remembered is not only because he was somewhat skilled for his size, but he had that brute raw strength. He was a lot like Deontay Wilder. Now, they didn't fight 100% necessarily the same, but they were brawlers. That's what they were. And if you were able to get past that, more than likely you could beat them, because they were not plan B, plan C fighters. They didn't have that. All right? There's just certain fighters that are like that. They're brawlers. That's what Deontay Wilder is.
He made up for it with his
Doesn't mean that he's not a decently great fighter, but that's just what he is.
will, his heart, and his right hand, which made him actually more successful than some of those American fighters that are and were more skilled than him. So,
right, but let's talk about the other American fighters, compare him to the heavyweight division. Because you can't necessarily compare Deontay Wilder to what a Shakur Stevenson is. You can't compare him overall to what, a Devin Haney is, or a Floyd Mayweather Jr., or whoever the hell else you want to compare him to. A Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. There's no heavyweight in the world, in my opinion, right now that would probably look as skilled as those guys. The only two, in my opinion, that maybe would be on that level would be Fury and Usyk. And some would maybe even debate not even them. So it's up to you. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you can't compare heavyweights all the time to lighter weight fighters. If we take a look at Muhammad Ali, if we take a look overall at some of the heavyweight fighters, besides maybe the exception of a Mike Tyson, at least when he was facing bums when it came down to it, and maybe a Muhammad Ali, how many heavyweights overall really looked as skilled as the lighter weight fighters? If you watch Lennox Lewis or Muhammad Ali, they don't usually look as good as what a Sugar Ray Leonard or what a Marvin Hagler or what a Floyd Mayweather Jr. did. They don't look as swift. They don't look overall as good. They look a little bit more hittable. They look a little bit slower. It just is what it is. But that's just how it's always been, at least usually.
my point is, when I say Deontay Wilder, the Wilder we seen in the third fight is not the same Wilder we seen in the first fight. I'm not talking about a skill.
Well, no, it probably wasn't the same Wilder, because Wilder overall, he had Tyson Fury living in his head rent-free after that ass whooping in the second fight. So mentally, he probably wasn't completely the same, but physically, he very much was the same. And strategic-wise, he was very much the same as well, and that's why he lost. The main reason for this video is just to show you guys once again, what I've been telling you now for the past 2 years. They are never going to let this go. They're never not going to allege that Tyson Fury did not cheat, and that's why they're on his ass 24/7. That's why they try to degrade him no matter what. They hate this dude, and they know that overall that not only did he spoil Deontay Wilder's chance of now being the best heavyweight of the generation, don't get it twisted, they'll still try to convince you of that, but on top of that, Tyson Fury, as a Caucasian man, if he does what he needs to do in his career, some may debate him as the eventual greatest heavyweight of all time. Now, would I eventually put him there or not? It depends. We'll see what he accomplishes. Right now, probably not. But that is the main reason why Dante takes a look at Tyson Fury and degrades him the way that he does. Not only is he pissed off that he beat the new leader of the Black Panthers and Mr. Deontay Wilder when it comes down to it, but he's also pissed off because he does not want a Caucasian man like Tyson Fury to eventually be in the greatest of all time debate. He don't want him there. That's the same reason why he gets after Canelo Alvarez so much, or Lomachenko. And I get it. Is the complexion for the protection, a real thing for certain fighters, even Caucasians in boxing? Yes, you can certainly debate that, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, we have to know someone that, has, is being protected from a scandal when it comes down to because they have the complexion for the protection, or when someone is full of it. And I'm sorry, but Dante is completely full of shit.
Difference. I'm talking about the athleticism. I'm talking about the energy, his reflexes, his defense, and the way he takes a punch. All of that was...
What the hell are you talking about defense, man? Defense. This dude is acting like Deontay Wilder actually had defense in the first place. Deontay Wilder's defense has always been his offense. That's what a brawler's defense is. That's why that one recent Mexican fighter that Dante was rooting for, because, they're friends with Jose Benavidez and the Benavidez corner, because they love to constantly shit on Canelo Alvarez. So it's a mutual partnership. That's why that dude recently got knocked out. Because if your defense is only your offense, you're not going to last that long. It is what it is. You have to have decent offense and you have to have decent defense. That's why overall Fury was able to beat Deontay Wilder so easily in certain parts of the fight. Because he's much better defensively. He's a much more complete fighter than what Deontay Wilder ever has been and ever will be. Just is what it is.
In the third fight, and it was because of what happened in the second fight. So at the end of the day, Tyson Fury,
Well, I partially agree with that. It was partially because of what happened in the second fight, but there was no cheating that happened. Anyway.
he cheated. He got away with it. Matter of fact,
No, he didn't get away with shit. The only thing that he got away with overall is whooping Deontay Wilder's ass on a regular. That's the thing that Tyson Fury got away with. Anyway.
Teddy Atlas, he said it doesn't matter if he cheated or not. He's a better fighter than Deontay Wilder, which tells you the mentality of old media. They don't.
Well, that's not the worst point in the world, Mr. Dante, but once again, and I'm not really associated with anyone. I view myself as my own individual person when it comes down to now in the way we all are, but I don't really view myself associated with anyone. I always try to look back and see if anyone's making decent points. We have to be logical and objective. And if we see a narrative all in all that is biased overall in its certain narrative, then we do have to commentate on it. Or overall, we have to be more logical than that. Do I agree with Dante that maybe there are certain Tyson Fury fans or parts of quote-unquote old media that, even if Fury did cheat, they probably are not going to look into the facts? Yeah, I would partially agree with that. But I have looked into the facts. I've looked into overall what they call all the evidence. And I'm sorry, but I've just never been moved by it. I've never been fooled by it because, to be quite honest with you, there really is no clear evidence whatsoever that Tyson Fury ever cheated. And the shit that they have tried to pull out of their ass really has been quite phenomenally insane.
Care how Tyson Fury got the win. They only care about him getting the win. I mean, just think about this. If some of these fans are saying, oh, well, Tyson Fury was better than him anyway, regardless if he cheated or not. So the obvious question is, then why did he have to cheat? If he's already
right, but he didn't cheat. Anyway.
Better than a guy he's fighting, why would you need to cheat? Not to mention Tyson Fury was much bigger than Deontay Wilder.
We're not going to use that excuse. We're not going to use that excuse, and the reason why that is because, yes, Tyson Fury, in terms of weight, is bigger than Deontay Wilder. They're both around that 6'9" to 6'7" range. They both have very similar reach, and Deontay Wilder had a 50-50 shot in that fight. It's not like he was going up in weight when it came down to it, and it was like, wow, can Deontay Wilder truly win this fight? Let's not forget, he was favored to knock Tyson Fury out in the first fight, and that was a Fury that probably was at about 60-70%.
Oh, and by the way, guys, Luis Resto, the guy who cheated against Billy Collins and got banned from boxing, he was actually a better fighter than Billy Collins was. He was a...
Well, we can't necessarily say that because overall, Luis Resto, he did 100% cheat in that fight. And you know why we can say that? Because he got caught red-handed. Tyson Fury has never really been caught red-handed overall with anything with the gloves. So I'm sorry, sir, but you're laying on top of a pile of evidence that really doesn't even exist.
Much better boxer, but he still decided to cheat. So, the way old media, the way they look at this is Tyson Fury, I don't care if you cheated or not. You beat a black champion. Do you know how difficult it is to beat an undefeated black champion? Forget about how good...
Well, according to you, it shouldn't have been that difficult, Dante, because Deontay Wilder apparently is not that skilled, remember?
Yes, it doesn't matter if he was good or he wasn't good. You beat an undefeated black champion. And this is the way they look at it, guys, which is...
And you heard Dante basically state there, it doesn't matter if he was good or wasn't good. So basically what is Dante saying? Whichever way you cross it, even if eventually these allegations die down a little bit, he's never going to give Tyson Fury credit. He's always going to have to try to find a way to not give Tyson Fury credit. And isn't it so interesting how allegedly Tyson Fury cheated Deontay Wilder, but he knocked out Dillian White when it came down to it. He knocked out a multitude of other opponents, but yet he was never cheating then. Like I reviewed a video by Boxing Eagle, and he said, oh, well, I don't think Tyson Fury cheated in the Dillian White fight. Why not? He cheated in the Deontay Wilder fight, allegedly. Why would he not cheat in the Dillian White fight? I thought he had pillow hands if he couldn't cheat. So why is Tyson Fury still getting knockouts? Just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly why there's no way they're going to report on Tyson Fury cheating. That clip I played for you guys at the beginning of this video, that was Tyson Fury's sparring partner with smoking gun evidence that Tyson Fury was even cheating against his own teammates in
Well, once again, I would have to see the backstory in that because, once again, that could be a multitude of things. And once again, it's no offense, but that could be overall a multitude of things. Him just not liking Tyson Fury, or overall him getting his ass whooped in sparring and then him trying to reveal something. Now, who knows? Maybe is there a little bit of truth to it? There could be. But once again, anything in professional bouts and really pretty much Tyson Fury's track record, I've never really heard anything too fishy about the gloves.
And then after Tyson Fury's sparring partner put that video out, then Tyson Fury's own trainer came out and he apologized to the sparring partner. He said, "I'm sorry. We were just trying to build Tyson Fury's confidence." They were trying to build Tyson Fury's confidence by removing padding from the gloves to make Tyson feel that he was a harder puncher than he was. And no,
Well, I would have to see that, Mr. Deontay, and who knows, that could be true. I would have to see. But Deontay, a lot of the times, does like to twist words, so I would have to see overall on that. But anyway, but once again, when it comes to any professional bout, do I believe that Tyson Fury overall has messed with his gloves? Not from what I've seen. No.
nobody reported on this. Why? Because they feel the win is too big. You beat an undefeated black boxer in the heavyweight division. Old media is saying, ain't no way we giving this one back. I don't care how we got it. We're not giving it back. And speaking of that, let me just ask all of the fans that are going out of their way to defend Tyson Fury and don't really care if he cheated or not. Let's say after the fight, you were the one that they handed the gloves over to. And you seen Tyson Fury's gloves and you could clearly tell they were tampered with. But nobody would ever know about it if you didn't share that information. So what would you do in that situation? Would you tell the truth or would you completely cover it up? We all know what you would do, and you know what you would do in your heart deep down. We know.
Well, I understand overall what you're saying, Mr. Dante, but I think we also need to ask you the same question because you're one of the biggest racial pricks out here. It just is what it is. No offense.
What time it is. It's so crazy how...
Because we already know how you treat other fighters that are not black American fighters. We already know overall how you try to get after Canelo, or how you have to try to get after Lomachenko or Fury or a certain amount of these other fighters that have basically no meaning for you.
Old media and the rest of the racist fans, they indirectly praise black fighters. Perfect example. Did you guys notice before Deontay Wilder fought Tyson Fury when he was undefeated, knocking everyone out like Gervonta Tank Davis does, right? Did you guys notice what they were saying? They were talking about how he was the worst champion of all time. Windmill Wilder, he has zero skills. He's a horrible fighter. He's this and he's that. But notice, once Tyson Fury beats Deontay Wilder, old media makes it look like Tyson Fury beat Muhammad Ali.
Well, I agree with you there, Dante, but you do very much of the same thing. Whenever Canelo Alvarez fights a Caleb Plant or allegedly he's about to face some decent opponent, you always try to tear it down. You always claim how you want to see Canelo Alvarez versus Jamal Charlo when it comes down to it. But then when that fight was actually about to happen, you said, oh, well, we don't really want to see that because Jamal Charlo's coming off of his worst performance. So if you're going to call that out, Mr. Dante, you need to look at yourself in the mirror. Anyway.
He beat Lennox Lewis. So to them, Deontay Wilder is only a really good heavyweight champion if he's getting beat by someone that has the right complexion. Do you guys remember?
I agree with you, Mr. Dante, but you share many of the same values. So don't be bitching when it comes down to it because you do many of the same things. How many times have we heard Dante bitch, moan, and complain about, oh, Canelo is facing these weak white boys. But then when it comes to Deontay Wilder facing Robert Elenius or Claressa Shields facing Savannah Marshall, or when it comes overall to Terrence Crawford facing Jeff Horner, Victor Postal, oh no, those are the elite white guys. like, come on, man.
When Tyson Fury beat the heavyweight champion of the world, Vladimir Klitschko, man, that win, it fell on deaf ears. No one was talking about it. When Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder, who once again, according to old media, is supposed to be a fighter worse than Vladimir Klitschko. But when Tyson Fury beat Klitschko, no one was comparing Tyson Fury to Muhammad Ali. No one was saying or even comparing him to the greatest heavyweights of all time. They only did it when he beat Deontay Wilder because they feel beating a black fighter, it amplifies everything.
Well, I would somewhat agree with that, Mr. DontesBoxingNation, because black boxers, according to you, when it comes down to it, and also throughout the history of the sport, at least within the past 100 plus years around there, when it comes down to it, they usually have been the most dominant within the sport. So overall, of course, if you usually beat the demographic that is the most dominant, then it is going to be amplified by a little bit. But not only that, but when Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder, that was the second really great win in his career. The first great win was against Vladimir Klitschko. The second one was against Deontay Wilder, and that one also was not really that expected because he was coming back and we didn't really know what type of shape Mr. Tyson Fury was going to be in.
Old media knows deep down that this sport has been completely dominated by black fighters since the inception and is still dominated by black boxers today. Because the boxing world.
Well, you want to make it look like overall that it is 100% dominated by black fighters. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the times overall boxing is dominated by black fighters, but Deontay wants to make it sure that he makes it look like 100%. Right now, you have Alexander Usyk, you have Josh Taylor up there, you have Canelo Alvarez up there, you have Artur Beterbiev, you have Lomachenko, who in my opinion would not be top 10 right now, but probably top 15, top 20. You have Tyson Fury, you have Naoya Inoue that could debatably be there, and you have a few others. So if you truly believe that black fighters are as dominant as what you personally think, you would not overall try to put a certain amount of your narratives out there. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the times the most dominant fighters in the sport are black American fighters. But right now, boxing is very, very mixed when it comes down to it. It might be overall the most mixed that it ever has been. You have a great amount of these European fighters that are coming overall to the forefront that have great amateur programs, like that of the Russians or that of the Ukrainians, Overall, there are certain Asian fighters like Naoya Inoue and a few others that are starting to get into the fold. I wouldn't say that they've been as dominant, but they're coming in. Now, black American boxers are always going to be very, very dominant in the sport when it comes down to it. But right now, the sport is very, very mixed. And I don't think that there is any issue with acknowledging that. It just is what it is. If we take a look at the NFL, the NFL's history has been dominated at the quarterback position 99% of the time by Caucasians. But that doesn't mean that if we take a look at Patrick Mahomes or if we take a look at Russell Wilson, that we just degrade them because, they're black quarterbacks and they're being hyped up to a degree to where they don't deserve to be. Well, is that the truth? Or are those guys overall regarded to the degree that they are because they are actually statistically significant and they're great in their own way? So we have to know the difference between someone that is a great white hype or someone all in all that is just mainly and overly getting pushed because of their complexion, and there might always be a little bit of a perk with that, but we also need to know if they're great or if they're, more hype than what they are, greatness. Anyway.
We're used to seeing black fighters beat white fighters. This is why you will never really see too many black people jumping up and down celebrating like their football team just won a Super Bowl because we're used to seeing this in general.
I highly doubt that, Mr. Dante. When Andre Ward beat Sergey Kovalev, I think that you were jumping up and down because you have a very, very big racial issue and you live a lot of the times your personal life through these fighters. You wish that was you in that ring overall beating up Sergey Kovalev or beating up Mr. Tyson Fury, but you can't do that. So you hope that you hope that Deontay Wilder or Andre Ward or Terrence Crawford or some of these other boys overall, can do it for you. Some of these other guys can do it for you.
A black fighter beating a white fighter is as common as daylight. And this is why the standards is set so low for fighters on the hope list. You guys remember, it wasn't that long ago when Gennady Golovkin was knocking out fighters like Willie Monroe or Dominic Wade. ESPN and the rest of old media, they were...
Well, Dante, according to you, a lot of the points that you always try to make, those aren't white guys. So black fighter must equal elite according to you. Because whenever apparently Canelo Alvarez faces a European fighter, even though they're very clearly a decent A-grade caliber champion, apparently they're just some weak European fighter. Now, are Caucasians usually as dominant in the sport of boxing as what black American fighters are? No, they're not usually. But at the end of the day, we have to know the difference between someone who is a decent fighter and someone that is just another European fighter or another Caucasian that's just going to walk through. We have to know the difference. Like if we take a look at basketball, yes, 99% of the time overall, the black American players or the black players are going to be more dominant. But every once in a while, you get a Luka Doncic or you get a Nikola Jokic. So once again, we have to know overall the difference.
Already calling Gennady Golovkin one of the greatest fighters of all time in the last 25 years. They even had him ranked above Roy Jones Jr. as one of the greatest fighters. And just remember, guys, Roy Jones Jr., he beat James Toney when James Toney was considered pound for pound the best fighter in the world. He moved up in weight.
You know, James Toney, for whatever reason, he gets talked about more than any other fighter that I've seen that usually has more underwhelmed in his career than anything. Him and Bernard Hopkins.
To beat him. Matter of fact, it's so ironic because Roy Jones moved up to 168 to beat the pound for pound champion James Toney, which would have been equivalent to Gennady Golovkin moving up to 168 to beat Andre Ward. So while RJ was dominating fighters like James Toney,
And I do agree with Mr. Dante's boxing there. Nation there. I don't think that you can compare Gennady Golovkin and a Roy Jones Jr. Do I agree that, you know, quote unquote, old media was putting a little bit of extra barbecue sauce on Gennady Golovkin because he has the quote unquote, you know, complexion for the protection? Sure, you can allege that, but Gennady is a decently great fighter. Is he on the Roy Jones Jr. level? No, he's not, but he is a decent fighter. But I agree, he's not on the Roy Jones Jr. level.
and Bernard Hopkins in their prime, beating them with zero controversy. Gennady Golovkin is knocking out Willie Monroe and Dominic Wade, and old media is celebrating as if this man is arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time, even greater than Roy Jones Jr., which once...
Well, let's be real, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation. Overall, when it comes to Mr. Terrence Bud Crawford, who really hasn't defeated anyone other than Sean Porter, who's been a definitive A-grade fighter, you think that Terrence Crawford already is one of the greatest fighters of all time. So once again, I don't have a problem with some of the stuff that you're stating, but let's keep the same standards, please.
Again, shows you how low the bar is set when we're talking about fighters on the hope list. Tyson Fury can beat Deontay Wilder, a fighter that old media themselves said was the worst heavyweight champion of all time. Meanwhile,
Well, listen, we all know basically how haters or how certain people go. They always state all in all that that fighter, that, you know, he's not that good overall, or this guy, he's shit when it comes down to it. But then overall, when a guy finally defeats them, especially someone that they can really connect with, or all in all that they really like, then all of a sudden that fighter was really, really good because it makes their current favorite fighter look that much more better. That's just how people roll. It just is what it is. And Dante is the exact same. You know, because overall, once again, he claims all in all that all these European fighters are so weak that Canelo allegedly faces. But Jeff Horn, Victor Postal, boy, let me tell you what, apparently those guys are the creme de la creme white guys. Anyway.
Lewis, he's beating fighters like David Tua, Vitaly Klitschko. And let old media tell it, you would think that
David Tua was a decent boxer. He wasn't really that great. David Tua was another brawler. Very powerful, but you know, boxing skills, in my view, was lacking. But Lennox Lewis, in my view, does have a debate as the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time. Once again, if you've watched my videos in the past, you know that, in my opinion, the three heavyweight boxers that have a debate there are Lennox Lewis, Muhammad Ali, and Rocky Marciano, at least for their generations.
Lennox Lewis is nowhere near on the level of a Tyson Fury, even though Lennox Lewis has a far more superior resume. At the end of the day, we know what time it is.
Well, Lennox Lewis overall, you could debate maybe has a better resume, but I don't know if I would say by much. And the reason why I say that is because, and I've already mentioned this, how many great wins overall does usually heavyweights really have? Besides Muhammad Ali, the rest of them really only have 2, maybe 3 big wins in their career, because there's only so many fighters that you can fight within the heavyweight division. So Lennox Lewis, he was able to beat Evander Holyfield, Vitaly Klitschko. Those are 2 A-grade wins. He also was able to I believe, beat Mike Tyson, but I don't know if Mike Tyson was really an A-grade fighter at that time. So Lennox Lewis gets credit overall for his generation, but Tyson Fury overall has some great wins in his career as well. And he was able to beat Vladimir Klitschko. He was able to embarrass him. That was a clear historic A-grade win. And when we talk about Deontay Wilder, that was a clear A-grade historic win as well. And if Fury is able to beat Anthony Joshua, let me state this. If Tyson Fury is able to beat these 3 fighters, if he ends up beating Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, and Andrew Ruiz, and if he's able to stay undefeated, or at least pretty damn close to it, let's say he only has 1 loss, and he's able to beat pretty much everyone he's been in the ring with, then he will, in my view, have a debate as the greatest heavyweight of all time.
Yes. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. On to the next one. All right, now check this out.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. I just thought that would be very particularly interesting. That's really about it for today. But anyways, we will see what goes on later on with this. It'll probably be the last time that I commentate on this for a very long while. But once again, I was proven correct. Because overall, what I stated in my prior videos, overall, that is exactly what Dante's and Deontay Wilder's mindset still is. But it is what it is. Anyways, we'll see what happens in the near future. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Mr. Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, and also Mr. Andrew Ruiz. I'm very excited about those mix-ups. But anyways, we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.